Hello, everyone. In this video, I'll be showing my thought process for deciding where to set the breakpoints for this problem of investigating the update sidebar text function, and sort of showing where the most effective location is to get the most out of using the debugger. So just to remind you, the specific feature that we're interested in is this specific update when we go from a single digit line number to double digit line numbers, okay? This is specifically when the show line numbers option is created. And we can sort of like hypothesize that the same thing happens when we go from 2 digits to 3 digits. So remember, as we increase the number like of lines that are in our file, we increase sort of the width that's in this like left line numbers region. So we already covered in the previous video that line 332, this update sidebar text function, is where the sort of code for this implementation is located. So to investigate this using a debugger, first we want to set a breakpoint. And we cover this in the text, but a very important part of deciding where to set a breakpoint is knowing like what code gets executed and when it gets executed. So to get to that sort of like initial understanding, we want to use some of the code navigation techniques to sort of understand what's happening a little bit better, right? So what we might start with, what I sort of started with here, is showing the call hierarchy. So this sort of shows like the paths through which the function is called, right? So you can see we actually have something on init here, and then we can sort of expand this. So it looks like, on initialization of the editor window, we initialize this get sidebar, update sidebar text, and so it seems like this function is actually called during initialization. And again, here it looks like this init is also when we're just initializing base sidebar. So that we could see that the function is actually called sort of when we are initializing the whole like editor window and sort of like on the startup of idle. But then what we can also do is let's just find all the references. So let's see what we can find out from here. And I want to draw your attention to this end line delegator. So it looks like self.update sidebar text is an argument passed to this end line delegator. And to understand what this is doing, if maybe you don't know what delegators are, this is an opportunity to sort of Google around or use ChatGPT or some other sort of online resource to familiarize yourself with what a delegator is. But by just highlighting over putting my cursor over end line delegator, you can see that it generates callbacks with the current end line number, and that the callback is called after every insert and delete. So presumably, whenever we add stuff or remove stuff, this delegator is going to be called, which means update sidebar text is likely going to be called as a callback every time we, insert or delete from the editor window. So that is pretty helpful to know as sort of like initial background information. So now let's actually think where we can put a breakpoint. So at first, maybe you're tempted to just put it at the start of the function. I'm sort of refraining from putting it on the actual function definition because this is sort of what we know will be initialized at runtime. We don't want the breakpoint to happen, on the initialization. We actually want the breakpoint to hit when we're going from, line 9 to line 10, okay? So let's start with this. Let's just put a breakpoint here at line 338, sort of the first code inside of the function. And to actually run the debugger, remember, you want to make sure, as we mentioned in the text, you have a valid launch.json file. But after that, you can go to this run and debug option and just press play. And so when you press play, it'll launch sort of like a debugging session. And I think the issue right now is that I had this open. So I had a previous instance. I don't want to save this. Okay, so now this debugger session will begin. You can see it pops up my idlelib just like as if I normally ran idlelib, right? And so now I'm going to create a new file. And okay, look, you see how I didn't, swipe back to go to the VS Code window. When I just pressed like, new file, it initialized the Python editor window. And it seems like this got hit. And that is presumably because this update sidebar text happens on the initialization of the editor window, as we saw, through the brief code navigation. It also seems like this could be tied to, maybe that init widgets or like init initialization file. So now what we see here is the debugger view, and we go over what each of these icons means, but I'm just going to we're not actually at the part where we have, line 9 to line 10. So I'm really not interested right now in what exactly is happening. Of course, if we did have a question that was just broadly about understanding how update sidebar text works, then this might be a useful opportunity, but I'm really interested in just that specific feature. So I'm going to press continue. This is like the play button. So now it goes back to the editor window. And then now let's do show line numbers. And then, so now we see one. Now I'm going to press enter. Okay. And so right when I press enter, it went back to VS Code, right? This is the nature of the debugger, that once it hits the breakpoint, it'll go back to the VS Code editor to sort of show you now line by line what's happening from the breakpoint. So this is a little bit weird because it went from 1 to 2. I want to look at the case where it goes from 9 to 10, but this is likely an issue that we didn't really set the breakpoint in a very great place, because this code is being hit every single time we sort of change the line number. So I'll show you one more time. I'll press play or continue. And now we're back to, idle lib. And I'm going to press enter again to go from 2 to 3. And again, we hit this. So let's just walk through this real quick. I'll show some of the features or advantages of using this this debugger. And you can see right now that we can view these local and global variables. It seems like in locals, this end variable is equal to 3. Okay, so this end is equal to 3, and that to me likely has to do with us going from line 2 to line 3. And then we can see that we can keep stepping through this. So now I should be able to see width difference is 0. Okay, that happens because the length of the string version of end is, then we subtract the length of the previous end. So let's see what this self.previous end value is. Previous end is 2, right? Because we looked at the attributes of self. Okay, so that likely confirms what we were hypothesizing, that this prev end is what the old line number was, and end is what the new line number was. But again, this is not the actual implementation that we cared about. We want to look at what happens when we go from line 9 to line 10. So I actually don't want to keep going through this. I'm actually going to just stop the debugger session because I want to run this. I want to choose a better breakpoint. So what we see is that width difference kind of shows whether or not there's a difference in the number of digits, okay? And so I'm assuming that this if width difference is checked every single time we increase the number of lines. So what I'm actually going to do is place my breakpoint within this. That means width difference was a true value. So in Python, a 1 indicates true and 0 indicates false. And so if there is a width difference, then that means we're going from, 1 digit to 2 digits. So I want to place my breakpoint actually inside of this if statement. And so now I want to rerun this debugging session. And so let's see what happens. I pressed run on that. And so now we should open up idle lib. I'm going to do new file, and we still haven't hit the breakpoint yet, right? Because we haven't, switched back to the debugging view on VS Code. And now let's see, if I just press enter, we didn't hit the breakpoint, right? Because that code within the if statement wasn't actually hit. But now I think that when we press enter on this 9, we should hit the breakpoint because there is a width difference now. So let me go ahead and press enter. And just as we predicted, we went back to the VS Code in the debugging view. And so now we can sort of use the features of the debugger to explore these different variable values and see the line-by-line execution of the code when this specific event happens, when we go from a single-digit line number to a double-digit line number. So treat this as sort of some scaffolding to get started. And now once you reach this point, you can sort of answer the next questions on this upcoming activity that you have.